Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce, the podcast where we talk to extraordinary coaches and leaders to dive into the realms of leadership and coaching. We're your hosts, Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. So let's jump in with another guest and find out their answer to the question, what is your secret sauce? All right, and before we begin, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting, where they believe that your character is the compass guiding you through life's journey. Whether you're facing personal or professional challenges, they are dedicated to helping you discover and strengthen the core values that define who you are. Dave, what does the show look like today?
I would like to welcome Shelli, and I wanted to start off, Shelli, asking you, what is your favorite check-in question with your clients?
One of my favorite check-in questions is, if your mood coming into this space right now were a flavor, what would that flavor be?
Ooh, Matt?
You mean like just, okay.
You could pick a donut flavor if you want.
Okay, now I won't pick a donut flavor. Okay, so there's one that I really like. It's a sauce out of Austin, Texas. It's called Yellowbird, and it's sort of mild.
Is it like a barbecue sauce?
No, it has like a little kick. You sort of add it on to your eggs or whatever.
Uh-huh. Oh,
yeah, I mean, it's hot sauce.
Cool.
So I'm kind of spicy.
I like that. Yeah, I'm thinking my favorite sauce, one of my favorite sauces is I like to say Worcestershire sauce. And I also like it with onions and eggs. Shelli, how about you?
Interesting.
Yeah, mine would be a barbecue sauce. So there's a place in the Bay Area called Sauced, and one of my favorite sauces that Sauced makes is called pig candy, and so it's barbecue sauce.
Mm.
All right, I need to look up pig candy and visit the Bay Area. So when you're online at the sauce place, is it the sauce place?
Sauced,
like
sauced,
past tense.
Okay, sauced. When you're online at Sauced, waiting to get pig candy, and somebody is standing next to you and says, "Oh, hi, Shelli. What do you do?" How do you answer that question?
Yeah, that's a great question. I say I'm an executive coach, and I work with leaders to help them elevate their teams, their businesses, and their causes. And then usually there's follow-up.
I would wait.
They're like stunned. They just don't say anything. They're like, okay. Yeah.
I would ask one or two follow-up questions. Do you help me with my causes or sauces?
Causes.
We're at the sauce. Causes.
Your sauce causes.
Your sauce causes. I like that. So how might you help me with my cause? That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I work with leaders from a training and learning and leadership development perspective. A lot of the work I'm doing recently has been with small business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders inside organizations who are looking to lead their teams into new directions. So a lot of change management, succession planning, and that sort of thing.
Can I just ask, you find like your change management experience to be like, I've just found it to be critical as a coach, because it seems like that really, there's the sticking points of making shifts is really some just change management.
Yeah.
What do you find?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that whether I'm working with an individual one-on-one for personal transformation, or a leader who's trying to take an organization in a particular direction, human resistance to change, resilience through change, and just simply behavior change in general are the concepts and the constructs that we talk about.
Yeah. Shelli, how would you describe, speaking of sauces, how would you describe your secret sauce?
My secret sauce.
Mm-hmm.
So my secret sauce is a sauce that is subtle, maybe sweet at first, and you sit with it for a while, you enjoy it, but there's an afterburn. There's a kick that comes later. And so as I've been thinking about this question, I have a little story that might help illustrate my secret sauce as a coach and as a leader, if I may.
Please go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up playing softball from age 7 through college. I played softball, and my dad always wanted my sister and me to be pitchers because the pitchers get the limelight, the pitchers get the scholarships, the pitchers get all the attention. Well, I'm an introvert, so I don't like all the attention. And I quickly discovered that I'm a catcher, and I enjoyed being a catcher. And later into my career, after many years after I finished playing softball in college, I discovered that my experience and perspective as a catcher really shows up in my leadership and in my coaching style as well. And what I mean by that is I prefer to be behind the plate. I don't like to be in the limelight. I'm happy to be behind the plate. I have a relationship, ongoing conversation with the umpire. I get to greet the opposing players that come up and hit. So being behind the plate is certainly part of that. Secondly, from behind the plate, you see the whole field. It's a different perspective than anywhere else on the field. So I think it's more of a strategic view of the whole field. And I like that. I can run the field. I can say, okay, center field, you need to come in. The ball, this hitter hit to right field last time. Shortstop, heads up. This was a line drive to you last time. And then the last bit was really that predictive analytics. So being able to, I knew what pitch they hit. I knew what pitch I had called for the pitcher. I knew on what was the count when they hit the ball or struck out, and that sort of thing. And so being able to know the data behind, or sort of the evidence-based data that helped inform how we would strategically approach this hitter in the next inning.
And how did you discover that? Like, of all things, like, okay, so you're in the work world.
Yeah.
You and I used to work in the same corporation. When did that analogy sort of really hit home for you? How did that occur?
Yeah, I was actually on a panel discussion with 2 other women. We were speaking to a group of mid-career women in leadership, and we were talking a little bit about moving from survival mode into thriving mode. And we were talking a little bit about, someone asked the question about having played sports earlier in life, and what did you learn that's now showing up. And I hadn't thought about this idea of being a catcher before this moment, but that was the story that sort of came to mind. And I told that story, and it really resonated for a lot of people. You have to find what is your sport and what role do you play in that sport? So some leaders like to be pitchers. Some leaders like to be left field. Some leaders like to be the umpire. And so it's about finding your role, finding your sweet spot, and really playing to your strengths, I think.
Yeah, I like the analogy. How does the catcher help the client move forward, regardless of position?
Yeah, I think that the catcher helps the player to move forward, the leader to move forward by, again, sort of evidence-based approach, right? So with leadership, it's either we use a lot of assessments, we use 360 feedback instruments, we might use our own observations, we might use feedback and performance reviews, or what other key performance indicators that the organization uses to measure their success.
Yeah. It's a great analogy, and it sort of dawns on me. There's lots of things in order to think, especially like in seeing what's going on in the whole field. Yeah. And I think it just reminds me of like even Peter Hawkins and his leadership team coaching, where he doesn't discount the catcher from being on the field, right? Like how that affects the game. Mm-hmm. I think that's maybe you can.
Yeah, there's a role for everyone.
Yeah,
right? We all play a role.
Yeah. what would you, if you were to find a coach, what sort of role would you, what would you want from them?
Yeah, I like a coach who will listen and have empathy. Certainly, they don't necessarily have to go have had the same experience before me, but the ability to ask questions and have a perspective that maybe I haven't considered. That's what I look for in a good coach.
Do you want them to have like, like be that type of like catcher, or are you looking for that, or are you looking for like a different role? Like, do you want the hard feedback? Do you want that? Like, is that, what do you really like in a coach besides
Yeah,
that?
it's a great question. I hadn't considered it this way. I think, yes, I like hard feedback. I want the feedback because that's actually the best way I can improve. And I want that feedback from a perspective other than my own. So I do a lot of self-reflection. I know a lot of people do. And Matt, I know you do because we've worked together and we've explored that together. And I want someone else's perspective also. I think as I've matured as a professional, I've come to value that so much more, someone else's perspective.
Yeah.
I know my perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, that really gets me thinking on something, like how much of that do I really want from a coach, as a coach? And it seems to blur as a coach receiving coaching. And I really need it just to let me know. And it's almost, it can be, when I've asked even my kids the type of feedback, they say, well, sometimes I want somebody to jar me from my current thinking. Like I need that. And I thought that's a really interesting perspective on what you really want from a coach. I want someone to just like, they would say, hit me over the head with a bat. I have to use my baseball analogy. So
you get thrown out of the game in baseball, just to be
but
clear.
Gently.
Gently.
Yeah.
They want to be gently. Yeah.
There's something interesting about the percentages of success in baseball, and like, needing to be jarred, or needing to be disrupted. And it's partly like in baseball, right? Yeah. If you bat 300, you're making $1 billion. All right. If you bat 300 as one of the leaders that we coaches, how are you doing?
Yeah, he's
right?
probably
you're probably not long. Right. if you get there, right, to at least the leadership levels. Yeah. So how do you put success, like help leaders find that effectiveness, right? Of like, sometimes like there's a lack of self-awareness. You said perspective, like a leader gets up to bat and they keep doing the same thing that's kind of sabotaging themselves. How do you get that leader to pay attention to different data, different perspective, different ways of being?
Yeah. So I heard a couple of questions embedded in that. One I think I heard was, how do you help someone achieve success? And then secondly, how do you get them to hear the feedback? And I would say the first question is largely defined by what are the goals of the coaching? What do they want to get out of it? And how do they define success? So once we're clear on that, and what the organization, maybe their boss or the executive sponsor has communicated what he or she wants also, from the coaching, I think that a multi-point inspection is helpful, to borrow another metaphor, right? I think we use this for years, a multi-rater feedback tool of some kind, where the client, the coachee, can rate himself or herself on a number of competencies or areas, depending on the goals. And then other stakeholders can provide a comparable either rating or anecdotal feedback on the same dimensions. So maybe it's It could be stakeholder interviews as one way we collect that, or it could be an online survey as another way we collect that. But really being able to say, okay, Susie, you said this was your goal, and here's how you rated yourself. Your boss and you are very aligned, but your direct reports have this perspective of you. What do you think about that? And it opens up a conversation about, well, I manage my boss really well, but my team, carries the brunt of, whatever the example might be. So being able to have the conversation about alignment of perspectives is really powerful. And again, asking the person to reflect on, how do you experience this? How do you see this? What is it like for you in that situation? What feedback have you heard these people say to you? And
I think that's really rich, especially when I'm thinking about 360s. I think it's an eye opener when they realize that maybe their boss and them agree, but their direct reports and them don't agree, or stakeholders, and they just haven't included them in the discussion, haven't talked to them about it, and they're just going along because them and their boss are right on. And they don't realize that they're just, they're the subject of hallway conversations and the level of frustration they may be experiencing. With their everyday
or they may not
supervisor.
even realize the impact of how they responded to that project, or that how they gave feedback to their team member, and what that does for motivation. So powerful.
How about, for our audience, I'm going to just plug your regular newsletter because I always find it to be interesting and worth it to read.
Thank you.
And I don't say that about a lot of newsletters. So, Shelli, what are 3 resources you would recommend, and where do you find the source for how much you write? How do you get that?
Yeah, so there are lots of resources. I would recommend a lot of. I'm just becoming more of a podcast person as far as a listener. So I don't have a lot of podcasts other than The Secret Sauce, of course.
Thank you.
And there's a good one that's called "It's Your Business, Lead It," and that's a good podcast, especially for sort of mid-level managers and people in the more operational manufacturing kind of spaces. Those are good podcasts. Lots of books. One of my favorite books to recommend is 5 Dysfunctions of a Team for anyone and that's Patrick Lencioni's work. And it's just a great resource and fun read. It's a short read on what can go wrong in teams and how to mitigate that as a leader. So those are a couple of resources. My newsletter is at bluehorizon.coach and /blog. It is just pretty easy to get to. If you go to the main website there at bluehorizon.coach, you can pretty easily find the blog and subscribe to that. We'd love to have you follow along and make suggestions. My ideas frequently come from either my own quiet time and reflection, or something I heard in the news or in the media. I follow a lot of different groups and things on LinkedIn. I follow Forbes and Inc. and some of those other publications that are designed for business, and they tend to be hot topics that percolate. And those are a couple of my sources for topics, and all related to some kind of leadership, personal effectiveness, organizational change, and those types of topics are what I write about. Right. Thanks for asking.
Sure. Dave, what's your reflection?
I absolutely am still at home base thinking of the perspective thing, because it really made me think in a lot of different ways. And I like that, as coaches, we have to be comfortable, sitting behind the plate and at the same time, we still need to, be able to lean forward and, ask the right questions and move things forward and whisper things and kind of understand the context of everything. So I really love that as a reflection. And I'm going to use that as I think about teaching coaches of like, what position would you play?
Yeah.
And how would that be different as a coach? So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You may have to switch it up for our out of the U.S. guests, Dave. If you
cricket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
bat a ball,
maybe something. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was curious about that. I don't know enough about cricket to speak intelligently about the different positions on the field. Is the equivalent of the person behind the plate similar to a catcher's role?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. I'm super.
Yeah. Based on our British friends, we're actually not allowed to comment on that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we definitely football, not soccer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know there's a bowler.
Yeah. There's a bowler. Pitcher. There's a sticky wicket.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. That's about it. Maybe Nick or Helen or Joe can comment. And
we'll need a cultural translation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. One of the things I also like the baseball analogy, but I think the one thing that sort of stuck out to me was I do think that the catcher has a certain amount of prominence too in the game, and it's like an unknown, but it just allows the rest of them to shine. And I think that's really the role of the coach that I really relate to the most, and that drew me to coaching was I don't want to make the decisions, but I want to be in the same, like I want to be on the field when the decisions are made.
Yeah.
And I'll even like hold, like this is more coaching. I want to hold the space so that they can make the decisions. And that's what I really got. Like, oh, you know what? The coach is connecting all the other things, the previous time that the person was up to bat, how they did in the past, and trying to connect some of those other pieces. And I really think that may be one of the big value pieces of, in your secret sauce or in my secret sauce, where I'm really asking, like important questions, future oriented questions that connect what's gone on in the past to what could go on in the future. And that's really important because sometimes it's like, I know when I played baseball, I didn't play it. And even in a league, things can happen really fast.
Sure.
And someone needs to help me slow it down and ask important questions. So thank you for that.
Beautiful.
Shelli, what's the best way people get a hold of you? How do they, how can they get a hold of you? How can they read more besides in is it a weekly newsletter that you send out? How often is it?
It's several times a month.
Okay.
It's more than monthly, but it might not always be weekly, depending on where we are in the world and what's going on. But it's usually 2 to 3 times a month at least. And again, it's largely topic driven. So I did a whole series on time in my garden in the springtime, and it just really came out of literally gardening. and some of the metaphors I saw, it was so relevant to what I was experiencing in life and in work as well. And so it's somewhat regularly. It's between weekly and monthly, I'll say.
Okay.
So and the website's a good place to find me.
LinkedIn?
And I would offer to any. If your listeners are interested in scheduling time with me, they can find me at book.bluehorizonsolutions.org. And I'm happy to have a virtual coffee with any of your listeners as well.
Nice. Thanks. And then, of course, they can find you on LinkedIn as well. And
yes, LinkedIn. I'm on all the socials. They can email me. Sure.
Yeah.
So just a shout out to our sponsor. Are you feeling stuck or overwhelmed? Character Matters Coaching and Consulting provides leadership coaching and consulting to empower you to overcome obstacles and reach your full potential. visit charactermatterscoaching.com to learn more about their transformative coaching and how to get connected to Matt for your organization. Thank you so much, Shelli. I really appreciate getting the opportunity to get to know you, and it gives me some really good metaphors to play with around coaching. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and good to meet you, Dave, and good to see Matt again.
Yeah. Until next time, go take on the day. Thanks for listening. If you love this podcast, please share it with another coach or leader. Make sure you go to the show notes to get all the resources from today's episode.